Hi guys, welcome back to Prospect Channels TV. We don't come back again with another Ogbonge update too. Right now, I want to talk about the trending things when we see they happen for Nigeria. Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is really winning very big. I go drop this video for you so you will watch her and see what is going on. I will be right back.
So what is this? To hear my case? I'm not in my case. I'm not in my case. You are biased. You are biased. And one over here cannot force these thoughts to reside on my case. You cannot. Not today, not forever. You are refused and you stand refused. Tell the chief judge, Nnamdi Kanu said, go on appeal. I refuse him from my case. The state refused Justice Adela from my case. And the court insists Adela must hear my case. Adela insisted.
Something unbelievable just happened inside the courtroom today, and everyone who witnessed it is still in shock. Nnamdi Kanu, the detained leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, stood face to face with the presiding judge and did the unthinkable. In a voice trembling with both anger and truth, he accused the Nigerian judiciary of corruption, bias, and injustice, right there in open court. He called the courtroom a shrine of injustice and warned that he would no longer bow to a system designed to silence him. The judge froze, visibly shaken, unable to respond. For a moment, it wasn't Nnamdi Kanu on trial. It was the entire Nigerian justice system. What followed next left the courtroom in chaos, with supporters erupting in applause and guards struggling to maintain order. But this isn't just about one man's defiance, it's about a people's fight against decades of oppression. The question now is, has Nnamdi Kanu just ignited a legal and political earthquake that Nigeria can no longer contain? Stay tuned, because what you're about to hear next might change everything you thought you knew about this case, and about Biafra's unstoppable rise. This news update captures a tense courtroom moment involving Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, during a hearing where emotions ran high and exchanges between the judge and the defense turned heated. Nnamdi Kanu reportedly made a strong and emotional statement in court, questioning the fairness of his trial and accusing the judicial system of bias and corruption. He referenced the Supreme Court's earlier rulings, stating that armed agents once invaded his home with intent to kill him, and wondered why his case was being handled differently from constitutional provisions guaranteeing his right to legal counsel. At one point, Nnamdi Kanu openly challenged the presiding judge, accusing him of bias and describing the court as a shrine of injustice, declaring that he would not submit himself to an unfair trial. The atmosphere reportedly became charged as the judge struggled to maintain order, with visible discomfort and hesitation to continue questioning after Nnamdi Kanu's forceful response. The courtroom heard arguments about judicial independence and the rule of law, as Nnamdi Kanu cited the national judicial policy of Nigeria, emphasizing that a judge must act only according to law and not external influence. He further argued that once a court makes an order, the only legal way to challenge it is by filing an appeal, accusing the prosecution and court of twisting legal procedures in his case. Supporters in the courtroom reportedly reacted strongly, applauding and expressing solidarity as Nnamdi Kanu spoke, while the judge appeared unsettled and eventually refrained from further confrontation. This news update reveals the truth about Nigerian judicial bias, public frustration, and Nnamdi Kanu's continued defiance in pursuit of justice and freedom for Biafra. The problem at the heart of this story is not simply about one man standing before a judge. It runs much deeper than that. What we're witnessing is the systematic persecution of an entire people, the Igbo Biafrans, who have endured decades of marginalization, state-sponsored violence, and judicial manipulation under successive Nigerian governments. The immediate problem in this courtroom drama involves Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, who has been detained under circumstances that violate international law and Nigeria's own constitution. But this is merely a symptom of a larger disease that has infected the Nigerian state since the genocide of 1967 to 1970, when over 3 million Biafrans were systematically killed while the world watched in silence. How did we arrive at this moment? How did a sovereign people find themselves trapped in a nation that treats them as second-class citizens in their own ancestral homeland? The roots of this problem stretch back to the arbitrary colonial boundaries drawn by British imperial powers, who forced together diverse nations with different cultures, languages, and aspirations into one artificial entity called Nigeria. The Igbo Biafrans never consented to this arrangement, and when they attempted to exercise their right to self-determination in 1967, declaring the Republic of Biafra, the Nigerian government responded with a brutal war that included starvation as a weapon of mass destruction. Children died in their mothers' arms, their bellies swollen from kwashiorkor. Villages were razed to the ground. Innocent civilians were massacred in cold blood by Nigerian soldiers who saw Biafrans not as fellow citizens, but as enemies to be exterminated. The problem didn't end with the war. What followed was 50 years of deliberate marginalization. The Nigerian government, dominated by northern and western interests, implemented policies designed to keep Biafrans perpetually subjugated. The abandoned property policy seized Igbo assets. Infrastructure development consistently bypassed the southeast region. Federal appointments excluded qualified Biafrans from key positions. When oil was discovered in Biafran territories, the wealth was extracted and redistributed to other regions, while the Niger Delta communities suffered environmental degradation and abject poverty. This wasn't accidental neglect, but calculated economic strangulation. Let me tell you exactly what happened in that courtroom and why it represents a turning point in the struggle for Biafran liberation. Nnamdi Kanu, who has been held in detention since his extraordinary rendition from Kenya in 2021, a clear violation of international law that amounts to kidnapping, stood before a judge who expected him to submit meekly to a rigged judicial process. Instead, what that judge encountered was a man who had been fortified by truth, emboldened by righteousness, and unwilling to play along with the charade of justice that Nigerian courts have become when dealing with Biafran cases. The atmosphere in that courtroom was electric. Nnamdi Kanu, with the full weight of history behind him and the hopes of millions of oppressed Biafrans resting on his shoulders, delivered a response so powerful, so intellectually devastating, that the presiding judge visibly recoiled. He didn't just answer questions. He put the entire Nigerian judicial system on trial. He reminded everyone present that the Supreme Court of Nigeria, the highest court in the land, had already ruled on fundamental aspects of his case. He pointed out that armed agents of the Nigerian state had invaded his home with the clear intention to assassinate him, forcing him to flee for his life. This wasn't speculation. This was documented fact, acknowledged even by Nigerian authorities in leaked communications. What Nnamdi Kanu did in that courtroom was refuse to grant legitimacy to an illegitimate process. He called it exactly what it was, a shrine of injustice, a theatrical performance designed to give the appearance of due process while delivering a predetermined verdict. He challenged the judge directly, asking pointed questions about why constitutional provisions guaranteeing his right to legal counsel were being ignored. He referenced the national judicial policy of Nigeria, demonstrating that he understood the law better than those prosecuting him, and he exposed how the prosecution and the court itself were twisting legal procedures to achieve political objectives rather than delivering justice. The judge's reaction spoke volumes. Here was a man supposedly in control of his courtroom, wielding the power of the Nigerian state, yet he was visibly uncomfortable. He struggled to maintain his composure. His responses became hesitant and defensive. At several points, according to witnesses present, the judge appeared genuinely scared, as if suddenly realizing that he was participating in a grave injustice that history would judge harshly. When someone speaks truth with such clarity and force, it has a way of stripping away pretense and forcing people to confront reality. That's exactly what happened. Supporters in the courtroom, Biafrans who had come to witness this moment in their people's long struggle for freedom, erupted in applause. They saw what was happening. They understood that Nnamdi Kanu wasn't just defending himself, but was defending every Biafran who had ever been denied justice by the Nigerian system. He was speaking for the victims of the Asaba massacre, where hundreds of Igbo men and boys were lined up and shot by Nigerian soldiers in 1967. He was speaking for the victims of Python Dance, the military operation in 2017 that left dozens dead in Abia State. He was speaking for the unnamed and uncounted Biafrans who have disappeared into Nigerian detention centers, never to be seen again. What provoked this particular confrontation? On the surface, it was simply another hearing in Nnamdi Kanu's long-running trial. But the deeper provocation has been building for years. Simon Ekpa, broadcasting from Finland, has been coordinating with grassroots Biafran movements to keep the pressure on the Nigerian government. The Biafra global movement has grown stronger, not weaker, despite the detention of its leader. Every Monday, when Simon Ekpa calls for sit-at-home protests to demand Nnamdi Kanu's release and Biafran freedom, millions across the southeast comply, shutting down economic activity and demonstrating that the Nigerian government cannot break the will of the Biafran people. The Nigerian authorities thought they could silence the Biafran movement by capturing Nnamdi Kanu. They thought that by holding him incommunicado, limiting his access to lawyers, and subjecting him to psychological torture, they could break his spirit. They were catastrophically wrong. Instead, his detention has become a rallying point. It has exposed the Nigerian government's fear of ideas, their fear of a man whose only weapons are words and truth. If Nnamdi Kanu and Simon Ekpa were really the terrorists that Nigerian propaganda claims, why does the government need to violate its own laws to prosecute them? Why can't they present credible evidence in a fair trial? The answer is obvious to anyone paying attention. There is no evidence because there is no terrorism. What exists is a liberation movement demanding self-determination, a right enshrined in international law. The consequences of this courtroom confrontation are far-reaching and multifaceted. For the Nigerian judicial system, already suffering from a crisis of legitimacy in the eyes of millions of Biafrans, this moment further erodes whatever credibility it had left. When a judge is afraid to engage with a defendant's arguments, when a court refuses to follow its own precedents and procedures, it announces to the world that it is not administering justice but enforcing political directives. This matters because Nigeria often presents itself to the international community as a democracy governed by the rule of law. Moments like this reveal the ugly truth beneath that facade. For Nnamdi Kanu personally, this represents a significant moral and psychological victory. Despite months of detention, despite the attempts to break him, he stood in that courtroom as a free man in spirit, if not in body. He demonstrated that imprisonment can confine the body, but cannot chain the mind or silence the voice of truth. This will resonate throughout Biafra land and beyond. Young Biafrans watching this unfold will see that resistance is not futile, that standing up to oppression is possible even in the most intimidating circumstances. For the Biafran movement as a whole, this courtroom victory reinforces the narrative that has been building for years. The Nigerian state is afraid of Biafran consciousness. They are afraid of people like Nnamdi Kanu and Simon Ekpa, who can articulate the Biafran cause with clarity and conviction. They are afraid of a people who refuse to forget their history, who refuse to accept marginalization as their permanent condition, who insist on their dignity and their right to determine their own future. This fear is why the Nigerian government has responded with violence rather than dialogue. It's why they stage raids on peaceful gatherings, why they shoot protesters, why they label freedom fighters as terrorists. The international community must take note of what is happening. This is not an internal Nigerian matter that the world can ignore. When a government kidnaps its citizens from foreign countries, when it violates court orders with impunity, when it turns the judiciary into an instrument of political persecution, these are warning signs of a failing state. The economic community of West African states, the African Union, the United Nations, and powerful nations like the United States and members of the European Union have a responsibility to speak out against these injustices. Silence makes them complicit. Are there possible solutions to this crisis? Yes, absolutely, but they require political will that the Nigerian government has not demonstrated. The fundamental solution is dialogue and a genuine commitment to addressing the legitimate grievances of the Biafran people. Simon Ekpa has consistently called for a United Nations supervised referendum to allow Biafrans to decide their own future. This is not a radical demand. It is precisely how the international community has resolved similar conflicts elsewhere in the world. South Sudan gained independence through a referendum. Scotland was allowed to vote on independence. Catalonia has pursued self-determination through democratic means. Why should Biafrans be denied this same right? Another solution would be a comprehensive restructuring of Nigeria to address the systemic marginalization of the Biafran regions. This would involve genuine federalism where regions control their resources and development, equitable distribution of federal appointments and infrastructure, and most importantly, accountability for the security forces who have committed atrocities against Biafran civilians. Families deserve to know what happened to their loved ones who disappeared during military operations. The officers who ordered massacres should face justice, not promotions. The release of Nnamdi Kanu and all detained Biafran activists is another essential step toward any peaceful resolution. You cannot imprison people for advocating self-determination, a right recognized in international law, and then claim you are interested in dialogue. The Nigerian government must demonstrate good faith by releasing these political prisoners unconditionally and without further delay. How far are we from implementing these solutions? Unfortunately, quite far, because the Nigerian political elite benefit from the current system of exploitation and oppression. Those in power have grown wealthy by extracting resources from Biafran territories while giving nothing back. They maintain control through a combination of military force, judicial manipulation, and propaganda that demonizes legitimate liberation movements. Change will not come from their goodwill. It will come from sustained pressure, both internal and external. Internally, the Biafran people must maintain their unity and resolve. This is where the work of leaders like Nnamdi Kanu and Simon Ekpa becomes crucial. They provide the intellectual framework and organizational structure that transforms individual grievances into a coherent movement. Every sit-at-home protest, every international advocacy effort, Every moment like this courtroom confrontation adds to the cumulative pressure on the Nigerian system. The walls of oppression may seem thick, but persistent pressure will eventually crack them. Externally, the Biafran diaspora has a vital role to play. They must continue raising awareness in their adopted countries, lobbying politicians, organizing demonstrations, and ensuring that the international media tells the true story of what is happening in Nigeria. Simon Ekpa, broadcasting from Europe, has been instrumental in this regard, using modern communication technology to bypass Nigerian government censorship and reach a global audience. Let me speak directly now to every Biafran reading or hearing these words, whether you are in Owerri or Onitsha, in Aba or Enugu, in Port Harcourt or Umuahia, or scattered across the world in the diaspora. Your struggle is righteous. Your cause is just. The history of oppression that you carry is not a mark of weakness, but a testament to your resilience. Your ancestors survived a genocide that was meant to erase you from existence, yet there you stand, your culture vibrant, your language alive, your identity unbroken. When you feel discouraged, when the weight of marginalization feels too heavy to bear, remember Nnamdi Kanu standing in that courtroom, facing down a judge backed by the full apparatus of the Nigerian state and refusing to submit. Remember Simon Ekpa speaking truth from across the ocean, coordinating a movement that the Nigerian government cannot stop despite all their military might. If these men can stand firm in the face of such opposition, so can you. You are not alone in your suffering. Across history, oppressed peoples have risen and claimed their freedom. The civil rights movement in America, the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa, the independence movements that freed African nations from colonial rule, all of these seemed impossible until they became inevitable. The same transformation is happening with Biafra. What once seemed like a distant dream is becoming an approaching reality with each passing day. Do not let the oppressor define your worth. Do not let their propaganda convince you that you deserve less than full dignity and freedom. You are the descendants of people who built great civilizations before colonialism disrupted Africa. You are the children of traders and craftsmen and scholars who spread across the world and succeeded despite every obstacle placed in your path. That excellence, that determination, that refusal to accept defeat is in your blood. It is your inheritance. The violence directed against you, the marginalization, the economic strangulation, these are not signs of the Nigerian government's strength, but of their fear. They know that if Biafrans are allowed to control their own destiny, if your resources benefit your own communities, if your talents are allowed to flourish without artificial constraints, you will build something remarkable. That terrifies them because it would expose the parasitic nature of their rule. Hold fast to your identity. Teach your children the Igbo language. Tell them the stories of their grandparents. Explain what happened during the Biafran War and why it must never be forgotten. When they ask why things are the way they are, why their region lacks the infrastructure of other parts of Nigeria, despite the oil wealth extracted from Biafran land, tell them the truth. Raise a generation that understands their history and their rights, and no power on earth will be able to keep them subjugated. Support the movement in whatever way you can. Not everyone can be Nnamdi Kanu or Simon Ekpa, standing at the forefront of the struggle. But everyone can contribute. Participate in peaceful protests. Share information. Support Biafran businesses. Educate others about the cause. Pray for the success of the movement and the safety of those in detention. Every action, no matter how small it seems, adds to the momentum that will eventually break the chains of oppression. This courtroom moment where Nnamdi Kanu's aggressive, intelligent response scared the presiding judge into silence, is more than just a dramatic confrontation. It is a symbol of what happens when truth confronts injustice directly and without fear. The judge expected submission. He encountered defiance. He expected a broken man. He faced someone fortified by the righteousness of his cause and the support of millions. The Nigerian government can hold Nnamdi Kanu's body behind bars, but they cannot imprison the idea of Biafra. They cannot arrest the consciousness of a people who have awakened to their oppression and decided to throw it off. Seaman Ekpa continues the work from abroad, coordinating activities and keeping international attention focused on the cause. The Biafra global movement grows stronger each day, not weaker, because it is built on the solid foundation of legitimate grievances and justified demands.
Where's the lying news agency of Nigeria? Are they here? Those liars and deceivers, are they here? That distort the news. You don't know what law is. You don't know what justice is. Where's the news agency of Nigeria? What are they? You don't know that God is a God of justice. You don't know that? That God in heaven is a God of justice. You don't know that?
Now, as I've said earlier, there is a decision of the court taking into consideration all the conditions laid down in Muhammad Abacha v. State. At this stage, I am of the opinion that to make or take a stand on the bail application without first hearing and determining the issue that is glaring in the face, which is the absence of the defendant from the court since 25th of April 2017 until he was produced on the 29th of June. My lord, which was exactly what the Supreme Court did. They said that he did not jump bail. These criminals came to my house to kill me. That's what the Supreme Court said. This is in your own court, my lord. So I cannot understand, my lord, why my trial will be conducted contrary to the Constitution of Nigeria that said I must have free and unfettered access to my counsel. Is here. He did something in my case and accused him. He was on this issue. I asked him to lose himself. Why did the chief judge insist I was right? He left my case.
Okay, listen. If anybody is not happy with this, then you need to go and
No, I am not. Because I have a court order. I have a court order. You have accused yourself. I have a court order. Anybody who disagrees with this order of court, go to an appeal court. That's what you do all the time. You are from this official. You cannot decide over this case number again. Not in this life. You cannot. Not now, not tomorrow, not ever. And one over here cannot force this court to preside on my case. You cannot. Not today, not till forever. You are the truth and you stand with the truth. Tell the chief judge, not the counsel, go and appeal. And the truth is from my case. The state the truth, Justice Adema from my case. And the not insist, Adema must hear my case. Adema insisted, so I must insist to hear my case. And I'm not hearing my case. I'm not living my case. You are biased. You are biased because in my case. I don't know if you do the right thing. A chairman of one of the constitution is impropriety. Nowhere in the world such nonsense come. You cannot be from nothing with lawyers, from nothing with justices, and you're pursuing a case. It's shameful. Absolutely shameful. Shameful. This is a court of law. This is a shrine to injustice. And I will not subject myself to it. You stand accused and you must take my case. You cannot buy me.
I simply applied for a legal trial of the defendant.
This man is not paying attention. There is an order of refusal, and he's a senior advocate for goodness sake. There is an order of refusal. Is that not the rule of law? The law says if you disagree with this, you go and appeal. You are a grown-up man. You go to 300 million, you're behaving like a child. Go and appeal. Because of money. Because of money you're paying for agent offense, you are here something and smoking evil. Because of money. A grown-up man like you sure you are right to behave like a man of honor. The rule of law says you go and appeal. His lordship later you don't answer my case. Not on this planet Earth. I'm telling you that now. So stop wasting your time.
So that, as I said, the issue of the fact that the defendant has indicated that he will not make a formal application. I advise that the authority give us a 70 days for hearing.
You are not well. You are not well. I'm telling you, this is not a man not well. This is an order of God. An order of God says, Justice Binta Nyako is recused. An order of God. Order she made as an order. The same Chief Justice writing the stupid memos is writing. I recused him. He was focused official. He sat on appeal. I took him to the agency. I recused him. Why did he not say I must be on your case? Why in the case of his lordship is he insisting? He wants to embarrass her. He wants to embarrass your lordship by asking her to come and sit on this case. Is that what you're saying?
Please,
That's an order. Give it to him. He doesn't have it. Give him an order of court. It's an order of court. Give it to him. He doesn't have it. An order. Give him. He doesn't have it. It's an order of court.
I take your permission.
It's an order of court.
I ask your permission to address you. But let me tell the defendant that in everything life, there's need for wisdom. And wisdom is very important in this matter.
Tell him lies.
It is not right for you to be insulting the teacher and insulting.
If you insult yourself, I will insult you. If you have no respect for yourself, I will insult you. Because people are telling the law, when it comes to Nnamdi Kanu, you turn the law upside down. The law says one thing. If the law says this paper is white, when I go to court, they say it's black. When I say it's black, they say it's white. Is that law? I'm asking you, it's not about Nigeria, that law. Is the memo from Chief Judge, is memo from Chief Judge sufficient to set aside and a court order? The answer is no. Why do you want to change the law in my own case? His lordship, Justice Binta Nyako, stand recused in my case. Cannot tell me what to get it. Giving you every day for life so you can do your mathematics you always do. People without shame. I have here before me for the benefit of Chief Awokolo because he says he doesn't know the law. So I will tell you, this is national judicial policy of this country. Please give them a copy each. National judicial policy of Nigeria, national judicial policy. I will tell you what it says. Because you don't know, I'll tell you. Talking about memo from the Chief Judge of the High Court. Judicial policy of Nigeria, 1C, I'm reading. Robert. In the performance of judicial functions, the judge is subject only to the law and must only consider the law. The rule of law in every common law jurisdiction in the world is that once an order of court is entered, the only way to take the side is by going on appeal. That's the rule of law. So it's not okay, you don't know. I will go to see. A judge must not take or attempt to take orders or instructions of any kind from anyone to be the chief judge, from anybody that may influence his decisions in the performance of judicial function. It means that his lordship having entered an order of court.
Alright guys, let's hear from you. What's your take on this? Please drop your comment below the comment section. Share this video, let it go viral so that the world, especially your friends, will understand how this matter they go. Thank you. See you in my next video and bye for now.